Yo. Okay. Let me just make sure stream's looking right and make sure that everything looks good. Everything looks copacetic. We here now. Let me check my sound real quick one time. Hold on. One time for the one time. Bet. Alright. Sound is in effect. Okay. So, as the title explains, I'm going to be going through every single tank class on SOD, giving my thoughts and predictions on what runes we could possibly see in Phase 4. Now, the way I did this was, I thought about and wrote down all of the runes that we've seen thus far, how they work in the classic landscape, even though SOD to me is kind of far removed from classic. Not far, but it has the vanilla skin, but it's not really classic. Like, right? It's more, the more runes we get, the more power we get, it gets closer to like TBC, Wrath, and further away from vanilla. Still has that vanilla skin, but it's not really there yet, right? Even if it's still operating under like vanilla mechanics. But anyway, I thought about the runes that we've gotten thus far, right? The kind of power they've brought and how Blizzard has kind of tweaked certain things to kind of make it a friendly landscape for classic, right? Because as an example, Priest got Power Word Barrier like in Phase 1, right? And Power Word Barrier came out in Cataclysm and it was raid wide. Power Word Barrier in SOD is party wide. So there you have it. Like, they had to kind of reduce the power level to kind of make it fit the classic landscape. So that's kind of what I did with my rune predictions. I looked at some of the things that each tank class can get and kind of shrunk it down, or thought about shrinking it down, or maybe thought about the way Blizzard could shrink it down and make it fit the SOD classic landscape. So I'm going to start with Warrior, since that's what I'm maining. That's what I'm more focused on right now. And I feel like that's the one out of the 6 tanks that probably has the most flexibility in it when it comes to runes, because I feel like Blizzard is doing a steady job trying to keep Warrior power level in check. Because even though I wasn't there for Season of Mastery 2019 Classic or 2004 when it launched, I've always heard stories about how, utterly broken Warrior get, especially as time goes on with better gear, so on and so forth. So Blizzard has been kind of fighting a battle on keeping Warrior's power level in check. They even mentioned it some time ago. Agron had I think it was like 2 weeks ago, he had tweeted that there's going to come a time where we need to normalize rage, because TLDR, more gear means for Warrior means more damage means more rage, so on, so forth. It's a vicious cycle. It keeps on repeating, right? So they're looking for ways to kind of normalize that fact, so Warriors aren't just by and large the best physical DPS in the game, best DPS in the game. And that kind of went into my rune kind of predictions, like when I was thinking about it. So for Warrior, I think, because it's not like a full hybrid, but it is a hybrid because you can tank in DPS. But for Warrior, I think there's obvious choices. For each class, I think there's obvious choices. But for Warrior, I think there's obvious choices, and then there's not so obvious choices. One that they would kind of have to tweak and fix a little bit before they implemented it in SOD. So I'm going to get the obvious choice out the way. I think Shockwave is a pretty obvious no-brainer choice for Warrior. Let me pull up Shockwave for those who don't know what Shockwave is. Shockwave is in the game to this day. He got introduced in Wrath, and it's kind of been a mainstay Warrior thing. Shockwave is almost as iconic as Titan's Grip to me for Warrior. But I'm going to bring up Shockwave so you can see. Well, I guess we'll use the Cataclysm tooltip. Yeah, it's still there. Why not, right? Let me see. Let me click on Shockwave. It's not going to come up. Up there it is. Boom. All right, bring it over here. So Shockwave. If you play Wrath, you know what Shockwave is. But if you haven't played, Shockwave is a frontal cone ability. Costs 15 rage. This is the Cata tooltip, by the way. Costs 15 rage, 20-second cooldown, and it stuns all enemies within a 10-yard cone in front of you. So Shockwave, to me, like I said, is pretty iconic to Warrior, in my opinion. That's what makes me think they could add it. Another reason why they could is Warriors are quite literally the worst AoE tanks. I don't think Shockwave makes them the best by any means, but I think it's another added button that would help them carry, do dungeon carries and just do AoE, right? Also, I think Shockwave works really well with the other specs. Like the other specs could use Shockwave effectively. It's not just for protection, even though Shockwave, when it was implemented, it was the capstone in the protection tree. Fury in arms can definitely make use of Shockwave. So I think Shockwave is kind of like one of the obvious ones that they could implement. Don't know if they will, but it's something that could work. It did a lot of damage in Wrath. Cataclysm, I don't remember it doing a lot of damage, but it does, it does take a lot of portion of your attack power, so they could always scale it up or scale it down. But Shockwave is one that they could do. I think that's one obvious choice. The next obvious choice I kind of put on my honorable mention list for Warrior because I don't think it fits kind of the classic molding, but it's still a very iconic ability, and that's Blade Storm. I'm going to pull up Blade Storm real quick because I'm pretty sure Blade Storm, not Blade Storm, Storm. Why am I can't spell today. Anyway, here we go. Blade Storm, you guys know what Blade Storm is. It's basically an extended whirlwind animation. The warrior spins for X amount of time and does a lot of damage to anything that's standing next to it. This version is a 90-second cooldown. Blade Storm has had various iterations, but we're just going to look at this one for ease. And again, Blade Storm is one of those things to me that's kind of like synonymous with Warrior. Blade Storm is, when it was introduced in Cataclysm, just like Shockwave. And it was a pretty dope ability. I think it kind of got overshadowed by Titan's Grip because two-hand weapon go burr in both hands. But, I mean, Blade Storm is still, to me, a pretty iconic warrior ability. The reason why I put it on my honorable mention list for Warrior is because, like I said, I don't know how well Blade Storm fits into the classic landscape. Blade Storm might be one of those abilities where it might be a little too powerful to exist in classic, just a little bit. So that's why Blade Storm was on the honorable mention list. Not to say that they couldn't tweak it. I mean, a quick and easy tweak to Blade Storm to make it fit to make it fit classic is, instead of hitting everything that's in your Blade Storm range, just make it hit 4 targets. Put a cap on it, easy clap, keep it moving. But then you water down the ability. So I don't know. But Blade Storm gets an honorable mention because I think it's pretty iconic to Warrior. Last one I'll say that's not on my list. It's not on my honorable mention, nor is it on my I think we'll get it list, is Titan's Grip. I don't think Titan's Grip is a very classic-esque, if you will. Of course it's iconic, right? The big two-handers in each, like now it's iconic to Fury, but for classic, like Warriors were just one-hander boys. They were dual wielding. So if you add Titan's Grip, that completely changes, to me, the spirit and landscape of classic. So I think Titan's Grip you probably won't see. I'd be 1,000% shocked if they added Titan's Grip to classic, to SOD. And honestly, I think it would be poorly received. I don't think people want to see Titan's Grip because when you see a warrior dual wielding two-handed weapons, that doesn't scream classic to you. That screams. So even though that only came out on Wrath, not that far removed from classic, it's still, you look at that and say, no, that's a retail thing. So I don't think Titan's Grip is going to be a thing, but I think Shockwave is definitely obvious choice number one. Blade Storm is an honorable mention if they tweak it, and I say no to Titan's Grip. The next thing I think they could implement is the talent Sudden Death. Sudden Death is a talent that what does it do? It makes it so you have a chance to be able to use Execute at any health level. It has a proc Execute, basically. I think Sudden Death works. Not only does it work for all specs, because all specs use Execute. If you're looking at my screen right now, you see I have like basically the common Fury tanking build that people use, and I had the Rune set up, so it's 28 points in Fury, 13 points in arms, right? This is like the deep wounds gladiator stance tanking style, and I think Sudden Death definitely could work because, like I said, if you use this tanking setup and then you use the traditional Fury setup and then the traditional two-handed arm setup, Sudden Death fits very well in each one. And who doesn't like a free execute, right? A chance to get a free execute. So I think Sudden Death definitely works for each spec. It would be a nice damage boost for the DPS specs. It'd be a nice threat boost for the tank specs. So I think Sudden Death could work. The next one I have, and I'm going to asterisk this one with, I think this only works when we see the normalized rage changes. Other than that, it might be a little too strong for SOD, and I think adding Deadly Calm. Let me pull up Deadly Calm. Deadly Calm was a Cataclysm thing. Where'd that other one go? Here it is. I got to change that background. I still have a Shadowlands background. I need to change that. But Deadly Calm basically made your for 10 seconds, none of your abilities cost rage. Free costing abilities. So let's move it over here so y'all can see the tooltip. But yeah, for the next 10 seconds, none of your abilities cost rage, but you continue to generate rage. Cannot be used during Inner Rage. Inner Rage was a thing in Cataclysm that like reduced the cooldown of your heroic strike by like, I think like half, like 50%. But that doesn't matter. Inner Rage part doesn't matter. Yeah, like I said, depending on what we see for the normalized rage / rage nerf that we're gonna get for sure, Deadly Calm could work, or it could just be too strong. Imagine right now Deadly Calm being in the game and you just being able to every 2 minutes go rage free for 10 seconds. Like, with how short fights last already, this would be incredibly broken. So I think this is only an option once we see the normalized rage nerfs. But I don't think it becomes an option until then, unless they heavily tweak it. Like, instead of 10 seconds for like the next 5 seconds, instead of your abilities not costing rage, they just like, I don't know, rage cost is reduced by like 30% or something. They would have to change it. But with normalized rage, I think Deadly Calm could work. Let's move that over here. And the last rune that I think could work, albeit a very lower chance than the other ones that I just mentioned, is a rune that actually comes from a talent called Best Served Cold. Best Served Cold is another Cataclysm one. And I know I'm like, y'all like, oh, he's just pulling from Cataclysm stuff. It's not that. But I looked at Mop, Cata. I didn't look at Legion, but I did look at Dragonflight and some of the things that they did for War Within. And a lot of the stuff that I would have added to the warrior kind of is already in the game. Like, if you look at it, we have Gladiator Stance from WoD. We have Devastate from Wrath. We have Wrecking Crew. I think that's also from Wrath. We have Flagellation is new, but we've had abilities like that. Shield Mastery isn't really new, but we had things like that. Consumed by Rage really is like Reckless Abandon. Like, once you hit max rage, you get a buff. So we've kind of had things from the other expansion. So I was just kind of looking at things that, like I said, made the most sense for the classic landscape, even though SOD Classic is different, and that kind of keeps the warrior power level in check. And Best Served Cold, I think, is strictly a prot thing, because what Best Served Cold does is allows your revenge to hit nearby targets. I think just a nearby target, and increases its damage. I think that would actually go far for a warrior, because like I said, they are the weakest AoE tank by a fair margin, and I don't think adding Best Served Cold increases their power level that much. Like, it's kind of crazy that Best Served Cold isn't in the game right now. I think Best Served Cold or an improvement to Thunderclap would be a better way to kind of fix warrior AoE tanking without making them incredibly broken. Kind of like what they did with Swipe, where they buffed Swipe, right? So I think Best Served Cold is like a sleeper pick, because I don't think they're going to implement it, but I would like to see it. It's kind of one of those things where I kind of put it on the list because I would like to see it. But yeah, I think going back to just to do the full list: Shockwave, Sudden Death, Deadly Calm with an asterisk, and Best Served Cold. Those are the runes that I think could be on not the chopping block, but up for grabs when it comes to warriors. All right, let's move on to Warlocks, my former main. So Warlocks, I feel like Warlock and Rogue, and Shaman, we're kind of like diving into new territory there, because none of those specs are tanks were tanks in any version of WoW. So Blizzard is kind of like looking at things that they got, looking at things that other classes have gotten. Like, we've seen like Warlock tank take some things from Demon Hunters, right? We've seen Rogues take some things from Monk tanks. And they're kind of just like tweaking it so it makes sense aesthetically and makes sense for the game. So with Warlocks, I think Warlocks, I didn't have too many honorable mentions for Warlocks. I think I just have 3 strong ones that I think definitely could work for Warlock tanking, and not just the tank spec, but really all the specs. Hand of Gul'dan is the first one. Hand of Gul'dan was a Cataclysm talent. Oh, it got introduced in Cataclysm. I believe it's still in the game. And The Kata version just does some damage, refreshes the duration on your emulate, and I think it does something else. I have to double check real quick, but I know it does those two things. Let me double check. I know there's an there's a talent that enhances Hand of Gul'dan, but I'm not even thinking about that one. So Hand of Gul'dan, yep. So yep, it does damage within a 4-yard radius. It makes so it also makes the target's chance to be critically hit by the Warlock pets by 10%. So all of those things to me fit the mold of the Warlock tank, especially if we're talking about a Warlock tank who's using Demonic Pact where your pet needs to crit to be able to proc it. So I think Hand of Gul'dan is a very, very strong choice, or not choice, very, very strong, what's the word I'm looking for? Pick. Like it's a high rated pick. I think it could definitely be in the game. So Hand of Gul'dan definitely could be in the game because I think it fits the mold of Warlock playstyle already. It'd be refreshing Immolate, which is like one of the Warlock's mainstay single target dots. It will increase your pet's crit chance, which directly feeds into Demonic Pact and things like that. And it's instant cast. So for tanking, it'd be great because a lot of our stuff are instant already. And it will provide a lot more mobility for the DPS specs. So I think Hand of Gul'dan definitely has a very, very fair shot at being implemented as a rune. The next one is Decimation. And Decimation was in Wrath. I think that's when it got introduced. I don't think it was in TBC. But Decimation basically gave Demonology Warlocks an execute. Whenever you hit something that was at 25% or below, your Soulfire, which is that super long cast. Let me see if I can search it real quick. The super long cast that costs a Soul Shard. It made it 40% faster, and it cost no Soul Shard. So it basically meant you wanted to cast this super strong ability during execute. Soulfire. Yeah, this is Soulfire if you don't know what it is. So Decimation, and the reason why I'm saying Decimation now is because it was kind of data mined early on. So I don't know if Blizzard has changed their mind on whether they want to implement Decimation or not, but it kind of was already data mined before, so maybe they're still trying to implement it. And I think it'd be dope because right now Soulfire is kind of just a spell that's used on an opener. You don't really use it anywhere else. There's no reason to because it's such a long cast time. It costs a Soul Shard and it's on a minute cooldown. Like, I don't even know why it's on a cooldown. Like, it doesn't even do that much damage to me for it to warrant a minute cooldown. But anyway, I think Decimation, because we've kind of seen it already, could work. And then the last rune I think would work for Warlock is Grimoire of Supremacy. And that rune actually was a talent, my bad. And I believe it was in MOP. Let me just check my thing here. Yeah, it was a MOP talent. I'll pull it up here and I'll show you guys. So here we go. These are the MOP talent trees right quick. And Grimoire of Supremacy. So what it did was it took all of your demons, replaced them with stronger versions of their demons. So as an example, your Succubus turned into the Shavara. Your Infernal turned into the Abyssal. Your Doomguard turned into the Terror Guard. And it made them deal 20% more damage. And I think Grimoire Supremacy is right in line to what the power level of Classic is. Maybe instead of doing 20%, maybe 10% would be more a Classic-esque thing. But I think Grimoire Supremacy definitely, just the way Warlocks have been going, like with, caster focus, but also pet focus. I think this is a good way to continually bridge that gap. So Grimoire Supremacy, I definitely think has a fair shot, and especially because we already got Grimoire Synergy, right? So we've gotten Grimoire Synergy, and Grimoire Synergy to me was a strong add-on, and when they buffed it, it was even stronger. So I think Grimoire Supremacy has a fair shot to be a rune for Warlocks in Phase 4. Honorable mention for Warlock, I just thought about this off the top of my head. I think they could implement, I forgot what it was called. I forgot what talent did this, but whatever talent or ability that made the Doomguard and the Terror and the Felguard, or not the Felguard, the Doomguard and the Infernal, those two, whatever made those permanent pets, those could be runes as well. Those aren't really Classic-esque, but I think it would be cool enough that Blizzard would kind of force it. So I don't think they have a very fair shot at getting runes, but getting the rune treatment. But I think it could work. But I definitely think Hand of Gul'dan, Grimoire Supremacy, and Decimation are fair cases for Warlock tanking, and especially since all three of those runes really work for all three specs. right? Next, we got the Paladin. And the Paladin was kind of tough because Paladins, one, already kind of got some strong stuff. Two, you have a class that tanks, heals, and DPSs sharing the same rune slots. So picking runes that fit all three is kind of tough. But I think, like I said, I think almost every tank spec has that one, or every class spec has that one that's kind of a no-brainer. I think the no-brainer for Paladin is Avenging Wrath, Wings. We all know that, right? Now, what iteration of Wings we get, who knows? It could just be the flat 20% damage, 20% healing one. It could be the, what is it? In Cat, I think it's like 20% damage and 30% crit for healing spells if you're a Holy Paladin or something like that. We can see that version. There's multiple ways they can kind of play implementing Avenging Wrath for SOD, but I think Avenging Wrath definitely has a fair shot. Like, Avenging Wrath is iconic Paladin ability, kind of like the way Blade Storm and Titan's Grip are kind of iconic to Warrior. I don't think we go SOD without seeing Avenging Wrath on Paladin, so I think that's kind of the no-brainer one. The next one to me is one that I think works very, very well. The next two technically work very well with all three specs, and what makes me think that these things are going to get added even more so is because Blizzard had already mentioned that they kind of dropped the ball with giving Holy Paladins an AoE button, or just a button in general, maybe not specifically tied to AoE, but just a button in general. So I think these next two that I'm about to mention really kind of work for, not only that they work for all three, but it fixes the problem that they had said before. The first one is Holy Prism. So Holy Prism is, let me see if I can pull it up. I think that came from Legion. I don't think that was the first time we saw it, but I know it was in Legion. Let me see. But TLDR, while I look this up, TLDR for Holy Prism is basically what it did was if you targeted an ally, a friendly, and you hit it, it healed, and you were not even just a Holy Paladin, but you were just a Paladin in general. It healed that target and then 4 other targets next to him. And if you targeted an enemy, it did damage to that target and 4 other targets next to it. I think that perfectly fits the party-centric, thing that Classic has going on. It's not an overly oppressive button. It's not a super broken button. If I recall correctly, Holy Prism was like on a short cooldown. It was either like 10 or 15 seconds. I'm trying to say, oh, here, it was part of mop. All right, here we go. Boom, easy. Easy. Here it is. Holy Prism, 20-second cooldown. Sends a beam of light toward the target, turning them into a prism of holy energy. If it's an enemy, they take one holy damage. Okay. If it's an enemy, they take holy damage and radiate healing to 5 nearby allies. And if it's an ally, they heal the ally. And okay, so I got it backwards. But you guys understand the concept. I think, honestly, the way I explained it works better. I think if you target an ally and it heals that person and 5 other people, it works better. But I digress. Anyway, Holy Prism, I think, definitely has a fair shake because, like I said, it checks kind of all the boxes. It gives Paladins a pretty decent AoE on a short cooldown. It gives them a button to press outside of flash of light. And it works for all 3 specs. So, I think it works. The next one, and I kid you not, I didn't look at the mop talent trees before I wrote this down. I just kind of thought about it. But ironically, it is the next talent over in this mop tree for Paladin, and that's Light's Hammer. Light's Hammer is a ground effect for Paladin. So what they do is, if you can read the tooltip, you can see hurl a light hammer at the ground. It'll blast enemies in a 10-yard radius. So basically, you throw a hammer at the ground, and if you throw it at enemies, it deals damage to every enemy within 10 yards of the hammer. If you throw it down to the ground in your holy, it'll heal all allies within a 10-yard radius. It kind of fits the same mold as Holy Prism, albeit it's stronger. It's a much stronger heal and damage dealing ability, but it's also on a longer cooldown, as you can see. So, with Light's Hammer, I think these two spells, or these 2 talents, definitely have a fair shake at being turned into runes. The next rune I have is, ironically enough, another mop talent. I promise you I didn't look at this before I did this, but it is a mop talent, Divine Purpose. And to be fair, honestly, Divine Purpose, even though I think it was introduced in mop, it's kind of stood the test of time for every expansion. It's almost part of every single expansion. So Divine Purpose is definitely a staple Paladin thing to me. But basically what it does is whenever you spent an ability that costs holy power, you had a chance to make your holy power spenders work as if they used 3 holy power, which was the original maximum holy power you could hold, and free. So basically, you got a super strong ability that really costs nothing off of a proc. Now, obviously, holy power is not in SOD, right? So they would have to tweak divine purpose to fit SOD's mold. One way they could do it is, like, as an example, if you're a holy paladin, right? They can kind of treat it like Infusion of Light, but just better, right? Instead of, like, your Flash of Light has a chance to, actually, you know what? They don't even have to do Infusion Light. They can make it work like the Glyph of Holy Light from Wrath, whereas, like, either your Holy Light or your Flash of Light have a chance to allow your next Holy Light or Flash of Light to heal that target and 5 targets within a 10-yard radius of the target. Like, they could do something like that for free, right? It would have to be for free because that's kind of the whole niche of divine purpose. Making strong abilities cost nothing at not a low proc chance, but on a proc, basically. So you can't use it. It's not an on-demand thing. You can't use it when you want it, but when it does proc, you might get, if it's a longer fight, you might get some mileage out of it. So I think divine purpose definitely could work if they tweaked it, because obviously we don't have holy power. So there you have it. But yes, I think Avenging Wrath is definitely the kind of obvious no-brainer pick. I think Holy Prism and Arcing Light definitely kind of have their shots, and divine purpose, you could argue that it's in honorable mention territory because there'll have to be a lot of tweaking for it to work because there is no holy power, but I think it has a fair shake at least. And that's really it for Paladins. Let's go to Druids. Honestly, before I say anything, Druids were kind of the hardest one to do this for, because Druids, like, if you look at their runes, they kind of got a lot of power from, like, old talents, right? And just passive abilities. Like, so I have the Druid tank set up here, right? And just looking at their rune selection. So Survival Instincts, Berserk, Mangle, and Lacerate. Those are, like, abilities, right? These are abilities that came later on. But then you look at, okay, so they never had Wild Strikes. Don't look at that one. They never had Wild Strikes. But if you look at the other competing one, Survival Instincts or Survival of the Fittest was a talent in Wrath, right? Gore was a passive ability that I forget which expansion Gore got introduced. I want to say it was Mop, but I could be wrong. I really don't know. But Gore is a passive. Improved Barkskin really is just Iron Bark from, when did that happen? Legion? Iron Bark. So they already have so much. It was kind of hard for me to say, okay, what don't Druids have that wouldn't make them overpowered and just better than the other Rage Tank Warrior and just the most solid tank in general, but also would feel good. So Druid was kind of hard. So I'm going to I'm going to tell you kind of what I came up with. So for ability's sake, I think Thrash is probably, if they did add another ability, the next ability on the list for Druid. Basically what Thrash is it's the same as Swipe, except instead of hitting 3 targets, it just hit everything within like a 10-yard radius, and it put a bleed on whatever you hit. So Thrash, to me, though, is kind of tough to implement because it's one of those things that it would be a great button, but is it really classic-esque even in SOD? And to answer that, to me, I don't know. Because if you compare it to some of the other things, like rogues have an iteration of Shadow Step, right? And we're going to get to rogues in a little bit. But rogues have a Shadow Step, right? Priests have Powered Barrier, right? So you comparing those things to like Thrash, and it's like, well, yeah, of course we can have Thrash. But a Druid with a Thrash that's balanced correctly probably becomes like the strongest AoE tank, because Thrash was, like I said, it puts a bleed on you, and Druids already have really high attack power thanks to the way they scale. So I don't know if Thrash would work. But if they had to add another ability, Thrash is the one that I don't think that they have already, like, because they got a lot of abilities that came later. So Thrash is like one of the ones that they don't have yet that is kind of like, all right, what else do we give them? But again, I don't know if it fits the classic landscape. The next ability is Stampeding Roar. So Stampeding Roar, to me, does not fit classic, right? I don't know, and I could be wrong. Somebody might correct me in the chat or in comments later on. But I don't think outside of aspect of the pack, I don't think there's any other group wide movement speed increase that you can just use with no penalty. Like aspect of the pack has a penalty. If you get hit, you get dazed, right? So that's the penalty for using it. But Stampeding Roar has no penalty. You just give everyone a nice. Right now, it's a 60% movement speed increase on a 2-minute cooldown, which can be reduced to 1 minute. Which we're never going to see that version in SOD. But I'm just trying to tell you what it does. But Stampeding Roar could work. It's one of those things that works for all specs, right? Because anytime you give a movement speed increase, it doesn't matter what spec you are. Like movement speed increase, especially on the raid wide scale, definitely works. So it works for all specs. It would be a unique utility that only Druids can bring, which fits the mold of Classic, right? Classic has a lot of classes that they only bring this one thing, right? So it fits that mold to of uniqueness and utility. But I feel like it's one of those things that might turn out just to be too strong, especially if you're looking at speed run stuff. And Blizzard doesn't really like micromanage speed run things, so I don't even want to harp on that too much, but it would be great for speed runs. But I don't know if it fits that Classic mold, but it is something that they don't have that they could get. I'll say that. The next two, actually I have two on this list. The next two that aren't abilities that I think they can change into runes. The first one being Savage Defense. And this one is just strictly tank druids, because Savage Defense really didn't do anything for Boomkin, Resto, or Pharaoh. Hold on one second. Alejandra? Alexander. Yeah, I'm sure that's how you say that. Druids definitely need some more AoE damage. I mean, I think you're right, but I think Blizzard is kind of set in their ways of, we want Paladins and Shamans to kind of be that. We want them to be the AoE tank, right? I think they want that. They want each tank to feel differently, because even though I had said it with the Warrior one, if they give Warrior Shockwave and Best Serve Cold and, Blood and Thunder, then every tank starts to feel homogenized. It was like, all right, what's the difference? Whether this tank has this much or this tank has so I think Blizzard likes keeping the different tanks separate. I will agree that just if we're not talking about tanking, if we're talking about DPS wise, Druids probably could use some love there. So like if Thrash was just a DP, like Thrash, let's say you could only use Thrash in cat form, right? Then I could see that working. But I mean, this is a tank stream, so we got to talk about the tanks. But I could see it working if it was only a cat form thing. If I do a rune speculation for DPS, we'll talk about that, because I think you're not wrong. I think you're right. I think Druids could use some AoE love. I just don't know in what form. But back to Savage Defense. I think Savage Defense could work for Druids. So Savage Defense, not even technically, it got introduced in Wrath. And basically what it did was your attacks had a chance to absorb the next auto attack on you. And it was based off of a portion of your attack power. And then got changed when Cataclysm got released. It got changed to your mastery. So it still did the same thing, but the more mastery you had, the more you absorbed. So it was really strong in Cataclysm. It was a very strong mastery for Cataclysm. That and like Blood Decays, like that's what made them like kind of on par with Blood Decays, because Blood Decays had the blood shield, but Druids couldn't heal like Blood Decays, but they could definitely soak up some damage. So Savage Defense was really strong, but I think Savage Defense could work in SOD just as, because like Druids don't only have like defensive runes, like they do, but they don't even use them. So I think Savage Defense with some tweaking could be implemented. I don't know how they would tweak it, but they would have to do some sort of knob tuning to make it work. But I think Savage Defense could work. They already got Gore, right? They made Gore a rune, so I think it's not a far leap for them to get Savage Defense in the game. And then the last one might come from left field, but hear me out. Force of Nature. Force of Nature is the treant ability, most notoriously associated with the balance tree, because it was the capstone talent for Wrath in the balance tree. But when Mop came out, Force of Nature became an all Druid thing, and depending on your spec, depended on what the treants did. So if you were Pharaoh, I think they did if you were a Guardian, my bad. If you were like a tank Druid, they did a mangle. If you were feral, they did a bleed. If you were a boomkin, they still did their regular thing, and if you were a resto, they healed. So at least I think they. I still have that mop talent thing up, so we can just read it. Let me see. We can just read what Force of Nature did for druids. Boop. Yeah, they healed. Okay, so yeah. So if you look at it, summon a tree and toast it. So this one was one tree. It wasn't three. Like in Wrath, Force of Nature was three treants that they only meleeed. No matter what spec you were, no matter what you did, they only meleeed. But here, you see it. So the balanced version casts Wrath. The feral version melees the target, and will cast Entangling Roots. Guardian, which is the tank druid, does physical damage and will taunt. And then if you're resto, they'll heal an ally and use Swiftman. So you can. I think this definitely could work, especially this iteration of it. Obviously, some number tweaking would have to go into effect. I think keeping it at one treant also keeps the power level down, kind of keeps it in check with the other SOD stuff. But I think Force of Nature definitely could work for Classic, for sure. And it would be a fun button for every single spec. Every single spec would get Force of Nature. So I think it could work, for sure, for sure. And I think that's it on Druids. Let me check. Yeah, no honorable mentions on Druids. Moving on. Rogue boys. The leather boy. Well, the other leather boys. So rogues, again, we're in that territory where there is no rogue tank in any other version of WoW. So we're going to kind of have to, I won't say shoehorn, but for lack of a better term, shoehorn some things, kind of take some things from monks, take some things from the other tanks, and kind of make it work, right? And for rogues, I think the obvious choices, because like I said, every class has one. I think the obvious one is Tricks of the Trade. Tricks is a staple rogue ability. Now, Tricks, albeit doesn't really work or doesn't really do anything defensively unless they make it do something defensively. Like if a rogue tank trickses another tank, him and the other tank get like a small damage reduction buff or something, right? Like for 5 seconds. That could be a version of Tricks. But innately, Tricks of the Trade doesn't really do anything except transfer threat and give whoever you're tricksing a damage amp. Normally, most commonly used for like snapshotting, like that. And Tricks really, I think the way for Tricks to work in Classic, without like a lot of set bonus supplements, right? Because that's really how Tricks really worked in like Wrath and other expansions. Like it was kind of boosted by set bonuses that affected it. But without having to dedicate a set bonus to Tricks of the Trade, one way it could work is just when you trick someone, it just gives you and that other person a damage amp, right? If you're tanking, instead of transferring threat, because as a tank, you probably don't want to transfer threat to someone else as a tank rogue. So I think it could work. They would just have to change the threat swap if you're not tanking, right? If you have just a flesh wound active, I think Tricks should just give you a damage amp or maybe give you a small DR. You and your target a small DR or something like that, just to help out. But I think Tricks definitely could work for all three specs, obviously. Another one is Smoke Bomb. So Smoke Bomb was an ability rogues had that before it got changed to just a PvP only ability. Basically what it was is it was a 10-yard smoke cloud that rogues dropped, and it created line of sight. So anyone standing inside the smoke cloud could not be targeted from things that were standing outside the smoke cloud. So it forced enemy casters or ranged attackers to come to you. Really, really cool ability. And I think it could really, really work for rogue tanking, especially in dungeons where you have mobs that are obviously casters or ranged and you're trying to create some LOS. You could drop a smoke bomb. Now they're coming to you. Now it's easier to tab target and Shuriken Storm and all that stuff. So smoke bomb I definitely think could work. I even think they could get away with adding on the 10% DR for everyone standing in smoke bomb. That was like a mop thing where if whoever was standing in the smoke bomb took 10% reduced damage. I think they could get away with that, but instead of raid wide, it could be party wide. Just kind of keep it in line with, sacrifice and barrier. So I think smoke bomb and Tricks definitely could work. One more button that I think could work, and I think maybe has a fair shot, but a little bit less of a fair shot than the other two I just mentioned, is Vendetta. And I don't think Vendetta was in Wrath, but I'm pretty sure it was in Classic, in Cata. Let me see. Double check real quick. But basically, what Vendetta did was it put a debuff on the target, and you did 20% more damage to that target for, I think it was a long debuff. It was like 20 or 30 seconds, and it was on a 2-minute cooldown. And let me see if I could just find it though. I don't know why I didn't just go to the talent calculator. I'm really wilding right now, but I could have just typed it in too. Here we go. Vendetta. Tripping. I'm tripping in this rogue section right now. So of course, I clicked the glyph of Vendetta because that was the first thing that came up. Kill me now. Anyway, this is the tooltip for Vendetta. So marks enemy for death, increasing all damage you deal by 20% and lasted 30 seconds. And of course, they can't stealth or become invisible. You will always be able to see them. I think this is a fair button for rogues. I think if you implement it in SOD, you probably have to either decrease the damage amp, so instead of 20%, maybe 15 or 10, or increase the cooldown. Instead of 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. If it lasts 30 seconds, like if it lasts 30, let's just say, here we go. Let's just say rogues have Vendetta right now, and they put it on the boss, right? I mean, right now in Sunken Temple, bosses really aren't lasting that long, but there are some fights that last longer than 2 minutes, right? If you can get a full use out of Vendetta, like the full 30-second duration effectively, then that means also effectively Vendetta has a 90-second cooldown instead of a 2 minutes. So I think bumping that up to 3 minutes, if you're going to keep the 30-second duration, which I think is fair, I think you should bump up the cooldown. Now, this gets more trickier. This gets trickier to use. The better your guild becomes, the faster your kills are, then you're not getting that full Vendetta. Or you're not getting, I shouldn't say full Vendetta, but you're not getting multiple uses out of it. So it gets a little tricky. But I think increasing the cooldown probably would be the best balancing effort without having to nerf the duration or nerf the 20% damage in. But I think Vendetta definitely has a fair shot for rogues, for sure. I think it's one of those, I don't know if I would call it iconic rogue ability, but it's one of those buttons that longtime players know what Vendetta is. It will be a familiar button. It works for all 3 specs. I mean, all 3 specs are basically, it's tank and 2 DPS, right? It's not like Rogue has a range spec, so it works. So I think Vendetta definitely could work. So Smoke Bomb, Tricks of the Trade, Vendetta. Those are the 3 I think definitely could work in SOD without spilling over the power level of rogues. And the last class we have is the Shaman boys, the other side of the coin of the tank boy, of the Paladin boys. And Shaman, so Shaman is kind of weird because Shaman I feel like is also, at least strictly talking about tanking, Shaman's also kind of skating that if we give them too much, they're going to be aggressively more powerful than the other tanks. And we saw that, right? That's why Blizzard nerfed a lot of the stuff that Shamans had. So, but for Shaman tanks, to me, I don't think there's a, okay, I mean, because I definitely said for every class there's an obvious choice. I think Shamans, there's a less obvious choice because you have to consider power level because there isn't a Shaman tank. So I think the less obvious choice for Shaman, but still something that they could use, doesn't really work. And the reason why I'm on the fence about this one because it doesn't work for every single spec. This is strictly an enhancement thing. But Feral Spirits, the wolves, the Ghost Wolves. I think the Ghost Wolves work incredible for enhanced tanks and enhanced DPS, especially with the fact that they heal they're summoned, the shaman who summoned them. So to me, it took a long time for shamans, feral spirits to do a lot of damage. Like I remember that was like a big gripe early on, like, oh, the wolves really don't do that much damage. They really aren't a cooldown. So maybe Blizzard would kind of have to increase the power level of it if they did implement it. But I think feral spirits definitely could work. Not to the highest degree. I don't think it has like the best chance of being implemented as a rune, but it's something, right? It's one of those things that is something. The next thing is the elemental totems. So either fire elemental or earth elemental. And I think, wait, let me double check. Do shamans have these totems? Let me check. I feel like I've never seen an earth elemental totem. You know, but we're level 50, so that would make sense. Summon earth elemental. That doesn't look like the actual Earth Elemental totem. I don't think they get it. I don't think Shamans get Earth Elemental totem, but I could double check real quick. One way to check that is just to go to phase 4, throw some talents in, so we put ourselves at level 60, and we see. These are all the spells that they get. I do not see Summon Fire Elemental, nor do I see Summon Earth Elemental. So I don't think that was in that was in Classic. So easy clap. But I think now that we've confirmed that, I should have confirmed that earlier. I think one of the elemental totems, whether it be Earth Elemental or Fire Elemental, has a fair shake, because those are also kind of staple Shaman things. And again, those are things that kind of just work for all specs, even Resto, where you don't really you don't care about the damage. Like, they're not going to do anything for you healing wise, but they're just going to be free damage that you can put down, right, on a powerful button. So I think they work with all the specs. They're obviously going to work. Fire one is obviously going to work more with Elemental, but I think it's a button that all the Shamans could use, right? And let me see, what's the next one I have here? Oh, I do have I have 2 honorable mentions for Shaman. The first one is Astral Shift. Astral Shift was a defensive that Shamans had, or not had, they have currently, because it's in Dragonflight. And it's on a 90-second cooldown, and it reduced all damage you take by 40%. It's like a shield wall ability. It's a really powerful personal cooldown. And I think Astral Shift works, but it would probably have to be, well, not even probably, it would have to be drastically reduced for Shamans that aren't tanks, because Shamanistic Rage reduces the damage you take by 20%. So imagine having Shamanistic Rage as like a DPS or a healer Shaman, and also having another rune slot with Astral Shift on it, which it will be a 40%. Like, so yeah, I don't think they if they did implement Astral Shift, they would have to change it drastically. But I would like to see it, because I feel like Shaman tanks they deserve a cooldown. They deserve a personal, right? A personal CD, right? So they can't use Shamanistic Rage because it's on the same rune slot as Way of the Earth. And you know what? Honestly, maybe that's another change. Maybe that's an honorable mention change that they could do when talking about rune implementation for Shamans. Maybe take Way of Earth, either take Way of Earth off the leg slot, or take Shamanistic Rage off the leg slot and put it somewhere else, so enhanced tanks can use it, because right now they really can't. So that would be one thing they could do, or just find a way to lower the power level of Astral Shift and still implement it. Maybe instead of 40%, which is kind of crazy, maybe 10%, maybe 12%, something a little bit more manageable. Something that is a little bit more manageable and can still live alongside Shamanistic Rage for the other Shaman specs. But Astral Shift definitely gets an honorable mention. And a big Shaman ability, most notably tied to the Resto tree, Spirit Link Totem. I think Spirit Link Totem has a fair shake. Obviously would have to be shrunken down to fit the classic mold, so that means Spirit Link probably wouldn't affect your whole raid or affect your party, right? Because very few things affect a raid from runes. I think Rallying Cry is like the one thing that comes to my head that affects all raid in SOD. And I don't think Spirit Link Totem, I think it's too strong to affect your raid in SOD. So I think keeping it to a party size makes it work and makes it comparable to Powered Barrier. It's an iconic Shaman ability. It's a very strong CD, so you could you can kind of use it as like a pseudo. If you're tanking with it, you can use it as a pseudo external, not even external, but CD for yourself, and it'll just redistribute the health from your own party instead of the whole raid. So I think I think Spirit Link Totem definitely gets an honorable mention. It still might be a little too powerful, even with the version that I'm talking about, but I think with some tweaks it could work. And then the last ability that I want to talk about that could be a rune for Shamans, and I'm only bringing this up because this spell has like damn near made its way into every single X pack for Shamans, and I really don't like this ability, Elemental Blast. Now, it's not a bad ability, but it just never felt, whenever I did attempt to play Shaman DPS, it never felt like it belonged in the rotation. To me, it never felt that way. It always felt clunky to use, even if the benefits are great, because, let me bring it up real quick. Let me see, which version of Elemental Blast could be used. I gotta stop clicking that. I don't know if it's in the mop tree, but we're gonna check. It is there. Boom. Elemental Blast. So it was a 2-second cast. It dealt damage and it increased all of your secondary stats for a short amount. And that's really good, to be quite honest. I honestly think with some tweaks, that could be a really powerful Shaman ability. 2-second cast, 12-second cooldown, and granted, there's no haste, there's no mastery in SOD, but they could change that. They could say increase your casting speed by 2%, increase your attack speed by 2%, increasing your stamina by 10 or whatever. Like they could make Elemental Blast work. I really, like I said, I don't like the ability, but I'm not going to deny the fact that in Season of Discovery it could work, and it could work for all 3 specs because we've seen it work for all 3 specs in MOP, in Legion, in WoD now. So I think Elemental Blast could work for sure. I think that's it for the Shaman. Let me see. Yep, I believe so. So that's it for all of the tank runes. I'll say this just to kind of close this out. None of the runes that I've said, except for Decimation, have like any real grounding. This is just my own speculation. Feel free to disagree or agree or however you feel. Maybe there's something from, one of the classes that you think I've overlooked. But I think with all of the runes that I brought up, I think those are options that definitely would feel most at home in Classic with some working, right? Like I said, Druids were kind of hard. Druids were kind of hard because they got a lot of stuff. Like, let's jump back to Druids real quick. So if we look at a lot of their runes, they got a Wind Fury, which Druids never had in no iteration of WoW, right? They got Gore, which was a later ability. They got some version of Ironbark, which was a later ability. They got what's the rune? Let me see. Is it improved? No, it's not improved bark skin. Where is that rune at? They got Survival of the Fittest, which makes them crit immune. That didn't come later. This was a big power boost, right? And I think this is honestly going to be, if Blizzard ever decides to actually keep damage levels high and not super nerf things, kind of with the way they did with Sunken Temple, Survival of the Fittest could definitely be a good rune to use. Right now, people don't really use it because the damage levels for tanks hasn't been that high. So there's really no reason to use it over Wild Strikes. But I think if damage ever becomes something that us tanks actually have to worry about, Survival of the Fittest is definitely going to get a lot of value. But I don't know what rune it is, but they got some version of natural reactions to where you dodge, you gain rage. So like Druids got a lot. They got Berserk, they got Lacerate, they got Survival Instincts. They got a lot. They got a lot of power. So overlooking them, it's like, okay, what do we give them? Do we give them Incarn? Do we give them Convoke the Spirits? Like, what are we gonna give them? Like, by the way, Druids are never giving in those 2 spells in SOD. I'd be shocked. But anyway, it was kind of hard to be like, yo, what do we give Druids that fits the mold without just by and large making them the best tanks? So I think Thrash, what did I say? I said Thrash, Force of Nature, Savage Defense, Honorable Mention, Stampeding Roar. I think those things could work, right? I don't think I really said any off the wall controversial picks here. Maybe maybe some people might think not including Titan's Grip as part of a warrior rune is controversial, but to me, Titan's Grip is just not classic. It doesn't scream classic to me. If I ever see a warrior dual wielding 2-handed weapons, I'm thinking that's a later version of WoW. Even though it only came out in Wrath, you see that and you know that's not classic. Classic is dual wielding one-handers. Classic is not dual wielding 2-handers. And honestly, I'll say devil's advocate. They could absolutely add Titan's Grip. We got Gladiator Stance, and Gladiator Stance to me came from all the way left field. I did not think that they would add Gladiator Stance, but we got Gladiator Stance, so Titan's Grip might not be such a far leap from Gladiator Stance. So there you have that. But that's really it for the stream, guys. I really had a lot of fun doing this. I might do this for healers too. DPS is different because there's obviously there's a lot more DPS specs, but I think I might do this for healers as well. This was fun, and I can't wait to see if anything that I said in this video. The best part about this is seeing if anything that you say in a video comes to fruition. I feel like I actively maybe not on camera, but I definitely said it in one of my guilds way before it was data mined, that sword and board needed to be a thing for warrior. Now it didn't pan out well because we don't even use the sword and board rune, but it's still in the game. I still kind of predicted that. So I definitely think with most, I would say 90% of the things that I predicted have a fair shot. But I can't wait to see if I can't wait to see if like maybe one thing, maybe nothing comes from the list. But I can't wait to see. That's part of the fun. But that's really it for the stream, guys. I appreciate it if you join me during the stream. If you catch this on a watch back, I appreciate it. Y'all know what it is. Y'all been great. I've been Soul and I'm out. Peace.